Hey, one more thing before you go. Would you like to learn how you can heal your mind, body, and soul with the wisdom of a Celtic-Norse shaman? Can you overcome mental health challenges such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD by using the ancient rituals, beliefs, and understandings of your ancestors? Stay tuned. I'm going to have a conversation with a shaman that will show you how you can connect with the spiritual forces that surround you and how to apply the teachings of the Ulfhafnar, the wolf warriors sworn to Odin of Asgard, to your modern day problems. I'm your host, Michael Hirsch. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in this episode is Dr. Mark Weisman. He's a Celtic-Norse shaman who has been providing mental health care for hundreds of people all around the globe, from the rituals of his ancestors to their beliefs and understandings of the spiritual influences around them. We talk a lot about that. Mark is able to blend all of that together to help many find peace and joy after years of anxiety, depression, and particularly post-traumatic stress disorder. Friends from many different militaries around the world have benefited from this. Mark's going to share with you a message from the ancient ways of his long Germanic Dane heritage, which will inspire you to embrace peace, harmony, and love in your life. We all need more of that. Join us on this journey of discovery, enlightenment, and empowerment, and find out how the ancient teachings can transform your life today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank your audience for having me on the show today.
Well, you have it's just an amazing journey. We had just a little wee bit of a conversation before we started, and you grew up in my neck of the woods for a while back, and I absolutely love your journey of where you're at right now because I think the universe puts us where we're supposed to be. I think, and once it does that, and we find purpose in life, it all makes us like fit in just a little bit better, a little more happier, a little more soul satisfied.
That's right, and that's exactly right. Is once we connect with the path, our journey, we find that because we're not resistant, we're not having to provide so much resistance. We have a lot more energy at which we can use for joy, happiness, peace,
Yeah.
contentment, those types of things, because we're not combating where we're not supposed to be.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that we as individuals sometimes forget that we're all connected to the universe. We just have to listen. We have to,
I,
that little whisper in the ear, the little nudge.
yep. And that's really the hardest part, right? Is um, we're so prone to want to drive. We want to be in charge. We want to be in control. We want to do it our way. When if we just sit back, relax, and listen, not with these, but with this, with
Yeah.
our heart, we start listening there. We're going to see where that's going to come through, and you're going to be given these nudges or ideas or even feelings that
Mm.
kind of drive us in one direction or another, and that's the universe talking to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. It has saved my life a few times, actually. I'll say just because.
It will, yes,
Uh,
it will.
but you have an amazing journey, and I'm really excited about getting into it. But I always like to start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Well, actually, I started my journey in Ohio, in what is it, Western Ohio. We moved from there to Indiana, then back to New Jersey. And then I spent a wonderful 10-year part of my life living just north of New Orleans, Louisiana. From there, we then moved to Tucson, Arizona, where I spent a huge amount of time in South Tucson um, under the tutelage of a Navajo man who, in my opinion, set me on the path of discovery that I've never I've never swayed from since then. That led me to the Marine Corps, where I served as a U.S. Marine in Hawaii. I know, difficult duty station, um,
Better than
right?
the one I got.
And then from Hawaii, of course, back to Tucson for a little bit before moving north, where I met my shield maiden. We got met and married in all of about 6 weeks. And then we decided to move our family here to Alaska, where we've been for about 30 years now, 30, 35, 40 years.
Somewhere thereabouts. That's a long time to be up there. Long time to do it.
It's wonderful. One of the things that I discovered as I came to Alaska was this connection to the spiritual realm here, where you don't have to go very far out your front door to be with Mother Yord, to be with Mother Earth, and to feel her and to
Mm,
communicate and feel her talking to you. You don't have to go very far. It's not like, LA where you've got to drive for quite a while before you get to
yeah.
see to see her and her beauty. But here in Alaska, she's all around us, and I think it's been probably one of the biggest boons to my spiritual growth, for sure, as I've been able to really connect with the spirits of the lands, of the earth, and of course of the universe. So it's been a very good thing being here.
I agree with that. That's one thing I missed from Colorado. Growing up in the mountains in Colorado, we were up behind Pikes Peak, and there were no street lights on our area. We could look up and see a bazillion stars, and we had
Right?
100-foot pine trees in our lot, and it and the grass and and the weather and the clean air and the clouds and the boy, it's just a whole different perspective. I moved
It
into
is.
closer where I live now. It is it. I mean, look, we found a really nice haven where we're at. We live northwest of Phoenix. I won't give exact because of my previous profession, but we live northwest of Phoenix, and we still see and can experience some of that because where we're at. But I really, really miss the connection. Going up in the mountains, taking a hike, going next to the creek, listening to the water, and hugging a tree. I mean, a real tree. We
Absolutely.
have trees here, but
Yeah. All of your sensory inputs, just bringing in all this energy, whether it
yeah,
be, the imagery that you're bringing in, the sounds, the smells, and all of that is just bringing in all of this energy into your being that you
yeah.
just can't, unfortunately, get in the urban setting.
What'd you want to be when you grew up? Did you go to school, college?
What did I want to be? I've gone through so many careers, desires. Um, I actually did go to college, and when I got to college, of course, anyone who's ever been to college and graduated, or even maybe not graduated, we know that when we get in that kind of settings, you're just exposed to so much knowledge and so much opportunity and vision that I would probably say I changed my major more than most people changed their clothes. Um, as I got through school, I finally graduated with a degree in education. I would then go on to an additional school to become ordained in the Christian church. And that kind of happened simultaneously with my college degree. And then I started talking to people, as a veteran of the armed services myself. I understood the challenges of coming back home, trying to reacclimatize ourselves to civilian life and a boss and those types of things. And I understood that. And of course, at that time, I was also a recovering addict. So I had that. And so I started talking to people and I started helping people. And I've kind of continued that thread now for, since I would say just before the 2000s. So late 1990s. Um, and uh, what a wonderful blessing my journey has allowed me to interact with such wonderful, awesome people here on the physical plane. It's just been a gift.
I can only
So
imagine. It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of different shaman. I've talked to Native American shamans actually. as well as some individuals that weren't Native American but got into being a shaman because they felt that that was their calling, and from a different perspective. You're the first Celtic Norse shaman. So, what would be the difference? Is there a difference, or is there something
Not
that?
really.
No, really.
Not really. It's our understanding. When you talk about spirituality, you're talking about an understanding, right? An interpretation, or as I like to refer to it, as a perspective. It's a simple perspective of how I look at spirituality versus how anyone else looks at spirituality. In my case, I know that my ancestors guide me. They are the ones that provide the energy beneath my wings, so to speak. So, in a recognition almost of their sacrifice, of their knowledge, of their wisdom, I support what they understood to be their spiritual connection.
Mm.
And so I recognize, the names Odin, Freya, Tyr, Thor, those gods are those representations of a deity figure. I represent and I recognize just simply because of my ancestry.
From that perspective, how does that? Earlier, you mentioned to me that you had gone into Christian ministry. So, I
I
mean,
did.
that's an involvement from Christian ministry because obviously, like I grew up Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic any longer, but I grew up Catholic, and there was this real strict regimen of what you had to do. As you grew up, actually, you had to go do different communion. You had to go through, the catechism. You had to go through everything, all this stuff to get to where you're at, and you had these certain beliefs, and you like I remember going through I can't even remember the name of it now. So we'll call it Sunday school. And it is, I kind of wiped all that from my mind. We went to Sunday school and they taught you the Bible. They taught you specific things that took place they taught you certain beliefs and what you should believe in and what you shouldn't believe in. I've since evolved from that. And I have a broader spectrum of what I believe in and what I connect with the universe with because of that. So that's why I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. So, from your perspective as a Christian minister, how did that journey in that evolution come about?
Well, I think my whole premise when we talk about spirituality, my idea of spirituality and what we grasp and what we hang on to, there are two real keys to that. The first key is it's got to make sense in your mind, right? So when you look at your spiritual touch, when people talk about this voodoo magic or any of these topics where you just can't apply it to your life, that's kind of a red flag right there. But then it also has to feel right in your heart. I mean, you have to find comfort in this belief, whatever it is, whether it be monotheism, polytheism, whatever, atheism, whatever it is for you, you have to find comfort there. When you think of topics, when you thought process about the beliefs, um, it has to give you comfort and you have to make sense of it. And this is where I found myself with the Christian church was as I went through becoming ordained and I went through the whole study and practice, and I would get in this room with men who had practiced this for their whole lives, and I would ask questions because that's the kind of person I am. I need to make sense of things. I can't just accept this, oh, it's just this way. That no, I need to know. So I had these holes in my belief. So as I looked at the doctrine that Christianity offered, I kept finding these holes for me, for my personal beliefs. Again, it wasn't making sense in my mind. Whether it felt right in my heart, it kind of, there was questions there, but ultimately, I think my heart was led by my my shield maiden, she is a Christian woman, um, and but I think we both grew to a place where we recognized It's more than just what's being presented, what's being offered. And this is where I came up with this idea that religion has two parts. It has a sliver over to the side that's called spirituality. And the spiritual part of recognizing a deity force or recognizing the energy of they're referring to them as angels or the Holy Spirit. That part probably true. But the thou shalls, that's referred to as the practice, or as what I call the practice. And that's when I'm trying to convert everyone to believe the same things I do. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Doesn't matter. If you want to be in this club, so to speak, you have to believe this way, you have to act this way, you have to do these things.
Oh, you froze.
And so uh, the other part, of course, being the practice or the thou shalls. And that's where we get into a population control. Please understand where a lot of these monotheisms came from. They came from a time where we needed to have control of a population for one reason or another, right? So we would, in those earlier years, they would go and get the king or the jarl or lord or whoever it was, chieftain, and they would convert him so that he would then enforce the rules, kind of trickle down, right? And so the practices became this methodology at which you bring all of these people into a reverence state towards this new religion. Where we start falling apart, or where you see, in my estimation, where things start falling apart, is where these original authors, so bent on converting other places, they began to modify their own doctrine to include um, pagan, and that's what they called them, pagan practices to ensure that they kind of brought them over, they converted them. And so that's really where religion falls apart. And that's really the difference then between religion and spirituality. Spirituality within the religion is a very small sliver. In reality, spirituality is all around us. It's everywhere. It's all things. There
Yeah.
is nothing that is outside of spiritual connection.
That's a brilliant analogy. The way you explain that, I think that it's interesting. And when you come through that, when an individual comes through that, myself, yourself, and others that kind of open their eyes to this, and they really understand that. And I'm not Bible bashing or anything like that because I believe in God. I believe in, I have faith in that regard. I just, from my perspective, coming from a Catholic arena, it was, you can only come to church and pray, but I'd go outside and stand next to a stream and look up. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you kind of go, well, you're telling me I can't do this, but I think I can do this.
Right.
From that perspective, and I do believe that unfortunately that some religions have gotten into more of as you said earlier, I believe in the control aspect of it, in a monetary aspect of it. Joel Osteen's got like a couple of jets and a huge mansion, but he didn't open
Well,
the doors
you
for him
could,
flooding.
and that's exactly right. But you could see that happening throughout history. I mean, that
Yeah,
was some of the basis for the age of the Vikings, right? Is
yeah,
that they would go and they would go to your Scotland there and take it back
yeah,
because these churches were the main money sources of that era because people had to give tithing and they had to do these things
yeah,
within the practice. And so um, you find that, I mean, even up till the Knights of the Templar,
yeah.
even up to that, they were the main. So I mean, the Knights of the Templar became the early bank.
Yeah, yeah, that
So
is interesting. Now people don't know that the Vatican's the richest little city in the whole world, actually. So, and that's a whole nother conversation we could have down the road.
That's a
Um,
long after we go, not before you go, right?
yeah, that's yeah. So, what brought you to? I know you had spoken with an individual Navajo. Was he a shaman in Tucson?
He was not. He was a spiritual man, but he was certainly not. Didn't qualify himself as a
Mm,
medicine man or as
anything like that
any type of. Certainly, I don't know that he was any type of group leadership.
from that perspective. What brought you to
Right.
shaman? I know that you listen to your heart, you listen to your ancestors, you listen your whispers in your ear. Why did you pick being a shaman in particular? May I ask that? What drew you to the shamanic practice? Because we'll talk about the rituals and what they are and how they apply, if you don't mind. But what drew you to this? May I ask?
You absolutely can, and I think I was called. I guess that's the best way to say it, because I got the nudges, I got the voices, I got the concepts, and I got the explanations, and in many cases I didn't fit, or my practice, my not my practice, almost said a bad word there, my understandings didn't seem to fit into any other mainstream. I mean, it just didn't make any sense anywhere else. But I think for the most part, what actually drew me to being a shaman was the spirits who called upon me to reveal these truths, and to help people to adopt them or parts of them that would help them to find a better mental health. And that's what I've
That's how I got
chosen
you.
to go.
It's
Yep.
interesting. I know you have through the beginning of this conversation, we referred to ancestors and how they spoke to you. I know there's a lot of cultures across the world and societies that actually believe in respecting their ancestors and honoring their ancestors and bringing the knowledge of their ancestors and consulting with them on many
Mhm.
occasions. But I think there are also a lot that don't. Here in America, for example, I know that it's not very prevalent where we talk to our ancestors in particular. I made a practice of doing it. I still have conversations with my ancestors, whether they be good or bad. Sometimes I say, "Why did you do this?" Because I'm feeling the effect of that now. But it's I had to learn that. I had to learn and open my mind and my heart, my soul to be able to learn that. Um, how important do you think connecting with our ancestors or remembering or honoring our ancestors into helping us to heal in this life? How important is that for us?
I think it's mission critical, and think about it for a minute. Think about cultures that are even represented here in the United States. You have a very large islander. You have islanders. You have, of course, there in Arizona, we had a very large Mexican and Spanish um, uh, heritage. And notice how those families bonded together, and they were they were happy. They were content. Um, those people, from inside their heart, not whether they had the latest vehicles on the road or whatever. I mean that didn't have as much value as it does to others. But you see these cultures represented. I have a friend who lives Minnesota, and his his family. He comes from a very German family. Northern Germany, what used to be Saxony, very much where my ancestors came from, and he has a large family, and they celebrate Oktoberfest. They celebrate all of the holidays, and they dress up and they do the German fests in that part of Minnesota, and they're content, they're happy, they're peaceful, and they've got a large family, they've got a large following. So I believe in my heart that that's kind of where America, predominantly America, although modern day almost anywhere is falling victim to the same curse, and that is as we've moved away from our ancestry, we're seeing the ill effects of that. We're starting to see where by moving further away, and it is that it's as we've gone away from embracing tightly our culture, that we find where you start having the ill effects of neutrality, of a word my assistant uses all the time. She says it vanillaizes everything.
Yeah.
And so and it's that loss of energy because those ancestors are capable of sending us energy. They can pass energy right into our being. But if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't recognize it, that energy is lost. It's lost. So yes, I do believe a deep connection with our ancestors, our whether they be in physical form or not, matters not. It is that energy at which allows us to heal, to grow, to learn, to know, to love. And I live by a very simple mantra in my life as I go about doing everything I do is that I try to be the descendant my ancestors would be proud of.
I think we should all do that, actually.
I agree.
I think we should all do that. We should honor those in front of us and be able to come back into recognizing that we wouldn't be where we're at if it weren't for them. I mean, realistically.
Agreed. That's a true statement in every way.
Yeah. It is, I lost my father when he was at a very young age. And so I value that. And my grandfather on his side, he lost him. My father was 3 years old when he lost his father. So,
Well,
he had a great stepfather, and I had a stepfather that, filled in as well. Which also proves you don't have to be blood to be family, from that perspective,
agreed.
because, it still gave me honor from that perspective, but they also, yeah. So I think it's extremely important for us to, keep those things together and to keep them
Agreed.
influencing us. I know that you practice a specific part of the Celtic Norse shamanism, and I know that I kind of messed this up a little bit in the beginning, so I'll let you say it. I'll let you say it first.
The
Okay.
Ulf Hefner.
Yeah, could you help us understand what that is and how it applies to us in the journey that we're looking to heal our soul, to heal our mind, to heal our bodies, to heal ourselves?
Well, absolutely, and I'm proud to do it because I've recently discovered not only do I have the birthright of a 53rd generation Ulf Hefnar, but exactly what they were. And there were real men in history. Many people, whenever you speak of the Norse, they speak of the berserker. Berserkers and Ulf Hefnars were very similar. Um, Berserkers were of the bear pelt. Ulf Hefnars are of the wolf pelt. So, in much the same way that the berserker would bond with the bear during a fight, during battles, they would bring in their spirit animals. They would assume the battle styles, the all of the things. We, the Ulfethnar, would then bring in the spirit animal, the wolf. Well, for those of you who are unfamiliar with wolves and the way they hunt, the first thing to know is we hunt in packs. So we like groups, we like teammates, we like a operation together. Um, in addition, one of the other major differences with the Ulf Hefnar is that they were cunning. They were more focused on intellect than on brute strength, like our brothers, the Berserkers. In early Scandinavia, the Ulf Hefnar and the Berserkers were used as shock troops by King Harald Halfrigi, who would go on to unify Norway. over a period of time. And he used these two types of troops to actually, as a shock, kind of a shock troop, special forces group, to go ahead of the main body. One of the things that comes with being part of the Ulfhefnar is that, as I mentioned, we hunt in packs. So even if you had one Ulfhefnar, you had, which, by the way, if they're singular, it's Ulfhefdin, and if they're plural, they're Ulfhefnar. One of the things that would come with this group mentality was that we could employ a group of people or a group of entities referred to as the Landvedi. Landvedi in Old Norse meant spirits of the land. And so there are stories, there are legends where an Ulfhefnar could employ the Landvedi to actually have the lands open up and swallow armies, because they were the spirits of the land. So they could have trees fall on the opponents, rock slides. All of these things could be affected when fighting an army with an Ulfhefnar in it. The Ulfhefnar, again, essentially the word in Old Norse means wolf pelt, which meant the men would have worn pelts of wolves that departed from their physical forms. The Ulfhefnar could never kill a wolf because of the spiritual connection with them. So we waited until they left their physical form, and then we would assume their pelts. And they were worn into battle, battle rages, all of the things that stories have been passed about the berserkers applied to the Ulfhefnar as well. So that's kind of the historical aspect of being an Ulfhefnar. In my family, 54 generations ago, my great-grandfather, Jens, was chosen by although the legends don't say, I know for a fact he was chosen by Odin to represent him and to carry on in the spiritual realm. He became the first in what would be 54 generations of Ulfhefnar.
That's amazing. You go back 54 generations. I know there are people
Yeah,
who struggle with their ancestry to go back 2 or 3 generations. So yeah, that's
yeah.
outstanding.
It's funny is that I was doing genealogy, and so I was back about I was probably back 10 or 11 generations. At the time, I discovered a document that was written by a tribe in Northern Europe called the Langobards, or Longbeards, and they had made a record of Ulfhefnar, or men with dog heads, as they referred to them.
Oh,
Um, and there was a collection of parentals and child records leading up to my 11th generation back, that would lead back another 20 some generations beyond them. So
that's
I
crazy.
was able to connect into work that was already done.
Yeah, that's crazy cool. I mean, it bizarre word, but it's crazy cool.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about crazy as much as it is cool, because they were my all of those generations were all born in Bjerrebysund, Denmark. For folks who don't know Denmark very much, there's two parts of Denmark. There's the Jutland, and then over to the east is the islands. But on the northern shore of the Jutland is the Bjerrebysund, and that's where we were for 50. My great grandmother is who actually came to the United States in 1898. So up until that point, that's where all of my generations were
Well, that's
born
pretty
and
cool.
died.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that you were able to find that out. So how do you incorporate the ancient rituals and the things to help with the individual? I know that we mentioned like PTSD, and you help with soldiers and you help with other individuals. And I've spoken about this on past episodes, but to clarify, post-traumatic stress disorder can come in many, many forms. It can come obviously from a soldier in combat. Cops get it. Firefighters get it, doctors get it, rape victims get it, domestic violence victims get it. And post-traumatic stress disorder is anything that caused a traumatic stress incident that has a negative effect on your mind, your body, and your soul during a particular time. How do you help somebody with like PTSD or mental health challenges?
Well, the first thing people need to understand is it's all about energy management. Okay, even with PTSD, even with the depths of PTSD, it's a matter of energy management. And what most frequently happens with PTSD, and particularly with PTSD, but other traumatic events as well, is that we have a lot of little stresses that are going to build up, build up, build up. And then we get hit with this big one, and we simply don't have the bandwidth to calculate, to function, to figure it out, to use some cognition towards uh, solving whatever it is that we're facing. And so it's a matter of figuring out our mental processes and begin to get those minor things out of the way, get them resolved, get the emotional energy recovered, that we can then cognitively look at the events that happened that caused PTSD, that caused what I call the bandwidth overload, which has, as you mentioned, has so many symptoms and behavior modifications. Um, and so part of my process, as I mentioned, in addressing this and getting the energy, is teaching those who want to learn the process of arresting an emotional reaction, applying some cognition, and responding accordingly, not reacting, but responding. I do this with, I call it my 5-step program. And like the military, everything has to be in an acronym. And so we call it SOBTOS. SOBTOS stands for stop. And that's teaching people to arrest behavior, arrest thought process, stop everything in its tracks, breathe, which allows us to now move away from a reactive type of response to to applying some cognition. Of course, stop and breathe, and then you get think. And this allows us to apply cognition to the situation. So we're actually thinking about, okay, he said this, whatever energy was assigned to it. Yes, I'm picking that up, but how am I going to respond? So, and then once we get past the thinking and we've developed a plan, we know how to act now. Our next step is to act accordingly, hence the A. Um, is that we want to make sure that whatever that looks like, whatever kind of, it could be that we need to get angry or upset or whatever, and that's acceptable. But we've applied cognition. We're not doing it with blind emotion. We're now applying cognition and thought process, and we're we're doing this right. And then, of course, the final step is the S, and that's where we're going to teach the support team, wives, children, parents, buddies, you name it, bosses. I've worked with many people to say, okay, when you recognize this scenario, whatever this scenario looks like, this is your role. Okay, so we're kind of giving them a, a, a role in the solution for this individual. And so it's really comes down, but it all comes down to managing that energy that's being thrust upon us on this moment, right? So we're preventing a trigger from happening, and we can slowly knock away those nagging stresses that were building up, that then blocked the mental capacity to process whatever happened, whatever traumatic event occurred. We can now address it cognitively. We
Well,
can
I'm sure that
start
you do the
thinking
same
about
thing with mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, and those kind of things. It also applies to the same principles apply. What kind of rituals does a shaman like you perform? Is there something that if somebody comes to you, they should be afraid of, or something they should be apprehensive? Nobody likes to go in and get a shot, right?
there's no rituals are really they're about displaying our conviction, right? So that's really what rituals are, and they're to draw attention and they're to show our conviction. Do you need any kind of fancy rituals and this that and the other? No. We have what we need inside. We don't need to externally display it. Do we want to? Are we feeling good? Do we have the energy to do it? Absolutely, by all means. Does it provide comfort? Again, does it provide comfort? I spoke a podcast they did just a couple of weeks ago was about dancing and singing.
Oh yeah.
And we talked about physical activities and how just getting out there and you feel the groove and you got to get out there and dance, get out there and dance.
I agree with that, and it's most people that listen to this or watch this and know that I have a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on digital media, performance, and art. And one of my projects that I had done, which I loved doing, was using creative arts to help heal. And it was the use of dance and music and drama and art in order to connect with our inner selves and allow that to help us heal. And the most amazing thing that I learned during that whole process was something as much as dance and music are a universal language.
Oh,
It's something your
yes.
body and your mind will
Oh,
feel
yeah.
no matter where you're at, what position in life you are. No
Yep.
matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter. Dance and music is a universal language. And even
Oh, absolutely.
people with dementia, I get excited about this. People with dementia, my father-in-law had Lewy body dementia. And it's interesting because he would be not very cognitive a lot of the time with many many things, including remembering who his daughter was. But when a song came on or some music came on, we turned the radio on, he would sing along to it and know the words. It was
Oh, the
it was
words.
yeah, it's pretty cool how all that connection works
Yeah,
together. Yeah, it's pretty
it
slick.
does. It absolutely does. And there's an energy involved in that, oh, yeah, it'll move you regardless.
Now, the ancient ways that you use and the ancient ways that you profess, the beliefs, understandings, the rituals, everything in regard to it. How did you inherit all of this? How did you come by these type of the skills? We'll call them skills.
Actually, I would have to say that, I when I came out of Christianity and came into what I would say my shamanistic um, level of understanding, one of the things that happened was I started spending time in deep meditation and I was trying to focus on energies and whatnot. And I wound up connecting to my ancestors, and particularly one ancestor, and my spiritual self who resides inside, which learned a lot about him now. But ultimately, what would happen is I would go into these deep trances, and I would actually go into a trance. And when I came out of the trance. Hard to say how long they were. Some of them were 10 minutes. Some of them were an hour and a half. I think the longest one I was actually under trance is like 5 hours. But when I awoke, I had printed material before me. That was I had gotten a book just for this because someone I had read somewhere that, oh, you should give your ancestors a book to write, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Put it out there, and sure enough, when I awoke, there were pages in the book that were written on. Now, understand, and this is where I kind of got the symbol of where I was supposed to be going, is they were all written in Norse runes. So
Oh
all of
wow.
these pages are written in runes. Fortunately, one of my ancestors must have been like me in that they needed pictures to 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 figure things out. And so there were some hand-drawn pictures, and just text page after page of the runes that explained many different ideas, principles, understandings that they had, and then following that, I would have like a channeling, which is where they didn't have control of my form. They were just communicating. I was feeling what I was feeling, what thoughts came into my mind as I read the passage. Of course, I had my little translator cheat sheet, right? Because I didn't write runes. I still now I'm okay with it. Um, but back then I couldn't. I knew nothing about them, so
Right.
I had to get a cheat sheet to actually figure out what exactly the words were written. But then I began to have more and more. I began to think about. I've written, or I shouldn't say I have written. I should say my ancestors have now written four, four of these books.
Wow.
And I don't have one with me at the moment, but they're old leather bound books with rapidy old paper, old style paper in it. And so they wrote these books, and then now what I'm doing is translating those books. I've read them now, and so now I'm going to translate them for all people who come see the website. They should be able to see what it translates to and what was said,
And all that good
and
stuff.
hopefully pass that on to others.
Yeah, that would be a good thing, I think. I mean, obviously, you've written another book as well. I mean, a physical book that people can order, which we can talk about. I know that you live in Alaska, but you help people all over the world with what you
I
do,
do.
and you do that. I'm assuming via the internet, and so you're not limited as to who you can help and who you can see
I agree.
with what you've got.
Yeah,
Correct?
I'll see anyone. If you're wanting help, there's an aged old thing that says those who seek happiness and joy or assistance and enlightenment, you'll find it. And so I'm just giving them the path to find me. And then if they find enlightenment or find their enlightenment through a
Uh,
path that I may have provided, it's a win for all of
It's
us.
a win for everybody. Now, I brought up. You have a podcast that you
I
got.
do.
You're like 39 episodes in, 38 episodes in.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
All
I
right.
think yeah, it sounds about right.
Could you talk about how to find your podcast and what the name of the podcast is and what you talk about,
Oh,
please?
absolutely. Well, the podcast is named the Alaska Ulfhafnar Skullskopper podcast. Available audio versions are available anywhere you get your podcasts. Um, Video version is available on YouTube. You can take a look at them all there. All the links and everything for all of our social media is all on our webpage. You can get them all there.
And
But it's a 30-minute show each week where my grandfather and I try to produce a message, just some ideas as to helping people to find mental health, to reduce their stress, reduce their anxiety, reduce those things, those challenges, and to actually discover a happy, healthy mental health.
that's a positive thing. I think we all need a little bit of touch of that, and sometimes a little more than just a touch about it. I appreciate that. And there, we were talking about writing books, but you do have one available for other individuals. So not only do you have service, what kind of services do you offer? I'm going to move to another screen so everybody can see it. But what kind of services do you offer? And the book, same thing with the book. How can they get a hold of it?
Well, the book is available. We'll start that because that's the easy, low hanging fruit there. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere you buy books. It's available. It's a Turn of Final. It's a concise, and I'm told it's really a left-brained book, more like spreadsheets and step by step by step. There's no real flexibility. The book that's coming out hopefully next year is the more right brain, the more creative, more long story. It's written more about my life, and it'll come out next year. So you'll have those two books to choose from. As far as services, I offer a whole variety of services. what originally started as helping friends and helping military, formerly released, yeah, military. Now I work with police officers, firefighters, paramedics, moms and dads, and just pretty much the general public. I offer individual group sessions where it's kind of like therapy, but remember, I don't come at things from a psychological perspective. I come at it from a spiritual understanding. So I offer kind of some steps as to how to learn how to manage the energies that are flying around all over left and right and Sunday. So we kind of manage those, and we learn how to do that. And we can do that either in a one-on-one. I do group sessions. I do public speaking engagements where I try to do the same thing that we're talking about here today. Is that, you know,
Right.
giving people ideas as to how to reclaim control of their mental health, and actually be in the driver's seat instead of being at the mercy of the fates.
Well, that, and I think that, people, and I profess this immensely, consistently, at least over this podcast in the last 4.5 years, is that, just don't be afraid to ask. You have to make that choice to move forward, but don't be afraid to ask, because there's always somebody out there, whether you, obviously we want people to come to you, but if just ask.
And and it really goes back to that adage that I mentioned before: seeking.
Exactly.
When you put in your mind that you
Yeah.
want to find something, you will find it.
Yep.
So getting that in your mind.
I agree with that. What would you say to someone who is seeking? What's the top three tips that they should recognize? Maybe that they should reach out to you.
Well, I think, I think for the most part, people who reach out to me are primarily suffering from one of three things: um, anxiety, and anxiety's a fairly, everyone has their own tolerance for
Mhm.
anxiety, and when you're starting to get, or when you feel you're getting to a point where you just don't feel comfortable anymore, you're starting to lose comfort, you're starting to have more times that you're spent um, in a real uncomfortable place. That's about the time that you need to find someone who at least can give you an answer that says, hey, have you tried X, whatever X is, right?
Right.
X is going to be unique for every individual. I think depression is the next one. Depression is one of those things where um, you can really feel isolated. So it's more challenging from a depression's perspective because you are feeling isolated. You're feeling that, well, no one really cares. And I can tell you, just as sure as I breathe, I do care. I do want to see a solution. And I think, but for depression, it's usually that first step is the most hard. It's the most challenging because, again, part of depression is to isolate, to pull it away. I think the third biggest thing that I see every day is I want to feel normal. And
We
I
all do.
love that phrase. Yeah, exactly. I love that phrase because it's so unique. I mean, as unique as we are as physical forms, so too is our definition of normalcy.
Yeah.
So, sure, I'll listen. I don't know how much good I'm going to do. But I think the biggest thing to take away when you are starting to seek answers and you're starting to try to get a solution, know that the hardest step is the first, is
Always
reaching
is.
out.
Yeah.
But by the time you put your foot down on that first step, you're starting to change the energy cycle in your mind, and you're starting to move forward. And that's going to be a boon as things go forward.
This works. This is one more thing before you go. So always ask if there's any more words of wisdom, but I think you just gave it.
I hope so, my friend. I hope that people understand that they have all the authority, all the energy they need to make a change in their minds. They don't need anyone else's approval.
Yeah.
They don't need anything else.
Yep.
All
It's a
they
choice.
need to do is say enough.
Yep. A choice.
Go forward.
A choice. A
So
choice.
yes,
Mark, thank you very much. I could talk to you for a whole another hour. I really appreciate you. I'm glad that whoever the person reached out to me to bring us together. That was Universe Talking, and I think that I really appreciate having you on the show. I'm very happy that I met you, and I hope we could be friends now.
we are.
We are.
If the universe brought us together, we are
Then we're
friends.
there. Well, see, that's my one more thing. So that works. I'll make sure that
Wonderful.
the link to your website and everything are in the show notes, including so everybody knows how to get a hold of you and how to get in touch with you. And again, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for sharing your journey and how you got to where you're at and how you help people across the world. Thank you for your service in the military and your service beyond that. So I appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for your kind words, and thank your audience too. For we know it. That's the first step. Is they're starting to listen. They're starting to open their minds to a different solution. So they've done
Absolutely.
the first step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always the first step. You have to make that choice. Make the choice, make the first step.
Right.
Anyway,
That's right.
one more thing before you all go. I want you to have a great day, have a great week, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.